as a 2 and 3-year-old, I'd look at the window and I would see faces. By the time I was 4, I was outside playing, and right by my house, they had these dirt mounds, and it was all woods by them. And I would go there and play. It was safe back then to play. And I would go there, and there was 3 or 4 of them that would come up to the tree line and just stand there while I played. I never knew anything different. They were just always there. I grew up thinking that it was not anything that everybody else didn't experience because I never knew a time that they weren't there. As I got older, and I did bring it up to different people, and nobody else had seen them. You know, I talked to my parents. I was very blessed because my parents never criticized. They never thought I was lying or anything like that. They just thought maybe I had had a dream or something of that nature. And they admitted, you know, that that wasn't something they had experienced. So as I got older, everywhere I was, given enough time, I would see a sighting of them either in the woods or something where I could physically see them. It wasn't always every day, it wasn't every minute, but it always happened. When I got old enough to get married and have my own family, we moved out in the country, and we had not been there all that long when it started again. And I would see them. We had 3 acres, but there was land all around us. And I would see them in the back fields. Just one or two individuals. It was never like I saw a whole bunch of them at one time. And a friend of mine right around the corner had invited me to her house, and they had 40 acres. And they had a creek. It was wintertime. I grew up in Michigan. And I would walk down there, and we would see the footprints. And she said, I always wondered what these were, you know. They're always here. So I told her, and she was just surprised. She couldn't believe what I was telling her. And so we started going out in her wood. And we did get a couple of sightings there as well. And they would come up to the house. My kids have grown up with them, around them. It's, you know, most of them, about, if not all of them, have seen them from time to time. I was at home one day, and I took my kids to my parents for the weekend. I went to the grocery store, and I had left a 50-pound bag of dog food on the porch. And I came home. It was right by a sliding door that went into my dining room and kitchen. Went up on the porch, and the entire dog food bag was shredded. It looked like somebody just took a machete and just totally leveled it. There wasn't even a piece of kibble left anywhere on the ground, anywhere on the deck. And as soon as I saw it, I knew they had taken the dog food. They had gone into our barn and taken horse feed and duck feed and chicken feed before. I went into the house, and the door to the sliding door wasn't shut all the way. It had been when I left. It wasn't when I got home. And I had several dogs, and none of the dogs came out to greet me. I heard them whimpering, and I found them in a back bedroom. They were hiding under a bed. And I went in, and my carpet in my dining room, which was, the sliding door was right directly off the dining room. The carpet was pulled all the way back to the door up. And my dining room table, because I had 5 small children at the time, was this gigantic, very, very heavy pine picnic table. It weighed about 250 pounds. And I had it because the kids couldn't rock on it. It was safer for them because they would rock in their chairs. And that was pushed up on its side up against the wall. The carpet was pulled back. There was many, many muddy footprints all over the dining room. The kitchen, everything had been pulled out of the cupboards and were either on the floor or knocked down onto the counter. And at one point, the dogs, my assumption was that the dog had gotten up on the cupboard. The Bigfoot was up on the deck because it was actually dog prints from my dog on the counter. The microwave was on the floor. The refrigerator door was open. I went into the living room, and other than a few things, knocked over, nothing was destroyed. I think they were they had from observing them since I was a child is these are the type of ancient people. They're not our kind of people. Their culture is different. Their way of life is different. What we believe is not what they believe, but they are people. And like with our own people, we have good and bad people. You know, we have some people that are really kind. We have some people that are very dangerous. I don't think it's anything different with them. For the most part, I think there's more good ones than bad. But I would never tell anybody they're either one way or another because I don't believe that. They have helped me time and time again in various things in my life. And so I know that there is good. They also are very, what I consider to be religious in a spiritual sense. They had at one time where I lived, they make structures, and they had a structure that was like probably 50 feet from my front porch in the woods, and it was rectangular shaped, and they would meet there at night, and you would hear them chant, and it was very calming. I mean, it really, the energy that it made you feel was like you were at church. It was just a very calming thing, and they really are very spiritual. As far as their people, they answer the Creator just like we would be to God. And that was told to me by them literally. After I left the house where they had gotten into the kitchen, I was there for almost 9 years. I never had aggression. They made a mess in my kitchen, but they were never aggressive. They never hurt any of my animals. They never hurt anybody. My godchildren would be over, and they were there one night, and I watched one run across the front yard. They're just a constant fixture. I mean, I just don't know any other way to put it. I've never lived anywhere the time they did not show up. Eventually, I moved to another location over in Michigan, and we had 10 acres there, and we were there about a week when my son came to me and said, Mom, this very, very tall man that was all black just walked through our backyard. I said, I hollered to him, he didn't respond. And at that time, my son was about 12 years old. I said, well, did you see skin or did you see hair? And he said, well, Mom, I think it was hair. It was long, shaggy hair.
Hi, Brad Strongfield. Your code is for people, for laughter, showing fuss, and being present. And that means you drive us about
reminded me of somebody in the 50s that slicked back. It was longer than what was on the face, but it was slicked back. I was really amazed by that because it went from this short hair all over his face and then it was slicked back there. And then as it went down his neck and his body, it went till it was probably about 2.5 to 3 inches long. So it was rather short hair, opposed to some of the other ones we've seen. And he was white. He was not an albino. There's a misconstrued on that too, because people think if they're white, they're an albino as a whole. My experiences, that is not correct. That's just my own experiences. Are there ones that are albino? Yes, there are. His skin underneath was more of a tan color to a white. He was definitely not albino. His eyes were black. And the three of them will forever be, as far as I'm concerned, some of my dearest friends. I mean, they're just amazing. And I had the closest relationship with those three, and I still do. But when I moved to that house, so many things happened. It was just unbelievable. We had a manufactured home, and it had skirting all around the bottom. And they pulled the skirting off the end, and they would go underneath of it during the night. And the kids and I would be in the house, and they would take their hands and they would pound on our floor, which would be like a ceiling where they were, but it was our floor, and you could go and knock it back, and then move around the house and knock on the floor, and they would follow you and knock it back. The kids got a really big kick out of it. I mean, there were times that they were frightened. I have 8 children. When I lived in that residence, 5 of the kids had already moved out on their own, so I just had my 3 little. And they got used to it. The boys not as much as my daughter did, but they tolerated it. You know, it was one of those things that it wasn't easy for them because they couldn't run to school and tell everybody. They had a few friends that they were close to that they did share with, not a lot because they didn't want to be ridiculed, of course, because we know how that goes. But they would come every night, and they got to the point where in my bedroom, I had my bed right by my window, and I always had the window open at night, and the cats I had torn apart the screen, so I didn't have to screen in my bedroom window. I would wake up in the morning, and they had put their hands in through the window, and they would play with their hair. So I'd wake up in the morning, and I'd have mud and leaves on my hair. Or if I put little things on the windowsill, it would be gone. And as it got warm in the summer, I didn't ever put an air conditioner in there because they like to look in at night. And I didn't mind that. It bothered the kids. The kids got blackout curtains, so they wouldn't see it at night. It never bothered me. I never to this day do I put curtains on my bedroom window. I'm not a big person that has a lot of curtains in my house. You know, I do it in my bathroom where I change my clothes, obviously. But I don't have a lot of curtains because they like to look in. And I've always grown up with them looking in, so it doesn't faze me. And finally it got one summer where it was so hot I couldn't take it anymore. And I put an air conditioning unit in that window so I could cool off. And I woke up the next morning, and not only was the air conditioner not in the window anymore, it was out in the woods. And I never put another air conditioner in my bedroom window again. They just got too upset. And if I moved my bed away from the window, they would pound along the window all night long, really rapidly, so that you could tell they were upset. And so I just always kept my bed that way, so I was right by the window. The kids, all my kids had TVs and cable TV, and it's really warm outside, so they had taken their curtains and pushed their curtains open, and they had the window open. And they would come and get me, and they'd say, "Mom, will you please tell your friends to quit watching the window?" You know, they were watching the windows to see TV. They may not know what you're watching, but they see the colorations, they see the movement, and they are as fascinated about watching us as we are them. So they would sit out there in the yard in the dark, and the kids would be countless times and said, "Mom, it looks like 2 big people sitting back there Indian style watching into the house." And they'd sit there and they'd watch in there and watch the TV. And that got to be a reoccurring thing. And then as soon as the kids would see them, they would get up and they'd very quietly walk back in the woods. The kids had they were involved in the youth group in church. and the church meeting that they were going to was at like 5:30, 6 o'clock. And I used to put food up for them, and I don't recommend it to people. I know a lot of people do that for them. Number one, you will never be able to feed them enough to feed their families. It's just not possible. You may give them food and it helps, it's a treat and they enjoy it. With the right plan, you don't get aggression if you stop. I was fortunate mine didn't. But again, I wasn't around other Bigfoot people. I had nobody to guide me. I had nobody to make suggestions. I just had me. And at that time, I was putting food out. It started out where I just wanted to see what would take it. And it just grew from there. And I started a notebook, and I would write down a description of each individual and give it a name that I would refer to it as. And through the course of the 9 years, I had over 60 individuals come through. And so I used to feed them out in the woods. And as many of you know, Michigan gets a lot of snow. And it got harder and harder to get food back there. So I started feeding them. They were up at the house every day anyway, so I figured, why am I dragging food back there for up here? So in my side yard where the trees were at, I set up a feeding station, and I had dog food out there, fresh vegetables out there. I had leftovers from dinner out there. There was a lot of food that went out there.
Ready to hit the road to success? With UVU's Predator Fire Work experience helps you navigate faster. Whether it's strategic management, information systems, or emergency services, your experience is your road. Why take the long way when you can get credit for the plans of all way travel? If you're in the future, get credit for what you already know. UVU, your work experience takes you through. Visit uvu.edu/CPM and start your journey today. Got work experience? UVU, it's more than baggage. It's the key to fast travel. Credit for prior your work experience includes media, emergency services, or technology division. Why wait? You can start working today. Have your work experience hop on board and get to where you're going faster. UVU, your next stop to success. Visit uvu.edu/CPM and start your journey today. Ready to hit the road to success? UVU's Predator Fire Work experience helps you navigate faster. Whether it's strategic management, information systems, or emergency services, your experience is your road. Why take the long way when you can get credit for the plans you already travel? If you're in the future, get credit for what you already know. UVU, your work experience takes you through. Visit uvu.edu/CPM and start your journey today.
When I put the buckets out about 6:30, 7 o'clock every night, and they knew it. They always knew when it was time to eat. They would come in later on, but they knew what time I put it out. And the kids needed to go to church, so I took the kids to church, anticipating I would then be home. I was going to drop them off, come home. I would be home in time to put the food out. I got to the church, and one of the workers had not come in, and they asked if I would stay and help. I said, of course I would. I didn't get home till 10 o'clock. I pulled in the driveway, and they were just hooting and hollering and making all kinds of calls, and I knew they were, wondering what had happened. We got out of the car, and the buckets that I have were on snaps and hanging up on a tree. I had hung them up there, and they were on there with snaps. All the buckets were on my front porch, unsnapped, taken off the trees and upside down on the porch. And when I left, they were attached to the trees. So we went in, and I got their food, and I went out there. They were just chattering and making all kinds of noises because they were obviously irritated that dinner was late. And I got their food out. Well, the kids went in the bedroom, and they had left the window open, but they had the curtains closed. And they had tried to reach into the kids' window like they did mine, and they got hold of the curtains, and they pulled the curtains and pulled the curtains out, but the curtains weren't stopped them from going out. So half the curtains were out in the backyard, and half of it was in. So the kids got quite a big kick out of that because they thought they were trying to steal the curtains. But it was a daily thing. When I lived there, the activity there was daily, if not hourly. I would be in the house, and it was very cold outside, and I saw what I thought was my son, because he had worn a black t-shirt and black jeans to school that day. And I saw this individual go across the yard. It was the same size as my son, and he was all black. And he went across the front yard and right into the woods. And I thought, what was Caleb doing outside? I mean, without a coat on, it was like 28 degrees outside. And I was so upset because he went outside without a coat. He had just gotten over that cold. So I hollered out the door and I said, get in, put your coat on. And it looked at me and then it just kept walking. And I thought that didn't even make sense to me because my son was always very respectful. He was not one that would ignore me if I called to him. And he came out of the bedroom and he said, Mom, why are you yelling at me? I'm in here. And I said, I just saw you outside. He said, I haven't been outside. It's too cold. And that's when it dawned on me it was one of the children. The kids would go across, I mean, we would see them occasionally. I did have one episode where a female that we had called Sadie, she was very large. She was 9.5 to 10 foot tall. Her shoulder width was approximately 5 feet. She had like carrot, orangish red hair. I mean, it was just like a carrot top would be, you would accuse the person that had that colored hair. But it was very long. I used to tease her, tell her that she reminded me of Cousin It. She didn't know what I was talking about, but Cousin It off the Munsters, because her hair in her head was long, but her body hair was just tremendously long. And when she would walk, the muscles that they had was just astronomical. And you would see the muscles flex, and the hair would just part over the muscles. It was just extraordinary. And I was in the house, I was folding clothes, and I had a friend over. And the dog started barking. And I looked out in the backyard, and there was vacant property next to us. And I knew the people that owned it, but nobody was ever there. And I looked over, and at first I thought I just saw a person. And the person looked very large, and then I realized it was a Bigfoot. And it was Sadie. And she kept bending down. And then she'd stop, and she'd stand up, and she'd bend down. She'd walk to a different tree. She'd bend down. I thought, what is she doing? And I didn't even grab my phone. I didn't even react. I was just like, what's going on? Was there a problem? I ran outside. My friend followed me, and we got out there. She had brought her baby. Very, very tiny baby. And she let me get about 50 feet from her, which I just thought was amazing. She didn't let my friend get that close. My friend stayed back. She was about 100 feet away from her and was watching her. And she let me keep walking closer. She never tried to get me to stop. I stopped at 50 feet because I didn't want to be intrusive. I already felt a little intrusive, but I didn't want to be uncomfortable for her. And I looked off to my right. That lived up the road was very aggressive. And every time he would come in hard, he would growl at myself, my children, my animals. And he was forever sneaking down to my house, and he was under this tree, absolutely terrified. He was just quivering up against the trunk of this tree, and it was a pine tree that had the boughs that went all the way down to the ground, and he was hiding under there. And I sat there and I watched her for almost anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes, and the baby would climb up the tree about 3 feet, and then it'd go back down, and he was chocolate covered. Just adorable. Didn't have a lot of hair, but it did have hair. The face was a chocolate color. You could see a lot of the skin on the face. There wasn't a lot of hair on the face or on the head, but there was hair on the body. And then it would run up to the next tree, and it would go up about 3 feet. And look around, and then it'd climb back down, and she'd bend over, and it almost like she was reassuring him. And that went on for 10 to 15 minutes. And she bent over and picked him up and put him on her chest and partway on her shoulder. And, I could see his face and how tiny he was. And she looked at me, looked me right in the eye, and then she simply walked off. And I started to follow her, and I probably went about 15 to 20 feet. And I just stopped. I just felt like, she was so generous about letting me see that baby and letting me see her. And I just felt it was more respectful not to go any further, and I didn't move. And I felt like that was a test, because I had seen them individually, maybe 2 at a time, since I had been there, and I had been there 3 years, I think, at that point. But after that encounter, it was like everybody came out of the woodwork. My woods were alive 24 hours a day. I had 2.5 acres in front, then a clearing where the house was, another acre and a half, and then a walking trail, and then the rest was all thick woods. And I was out every day. I had a pattern that I walked. They knew my pattern. They would play games. I'd walk it, and I'd just walk it 2 or 3 times. It was a 10-acre plot. And then the next door, I had access to that because I knew the people, and they said I could go through there anytime I wanted. And I did that every day while the kids were at school. And some days I would walk through the same path, and they'd have knocked over a tree. And I knew they were out there. I could hear them walk. And I'd say, okay, well, this is me ignoring you and walking around your tree. And I would hear laughter. I would really just hear them laugh. And then I would continue walking more. And then they would follow me. And I'd hear the footsteps. Occasionally see an arm, a leg, a face now and then. Or they would take little tiny acorns and they toss the acorns very, very gently, never hard at all, and just gently so they hit me in the back or on the arm or whatever. And it was just a very peaceful, respectful relationship. I never had issues with that group, never. One night, we lived on a private drive, and my son had walked, his girlfriend was going home, and she was at the front of the drive, and he walked her up there. And it was after dark. And he was, at that time, he was like 16. And he was walking back, and one of the Bigfoot had come up to the house and said, danger, danger. And I said, what's the matter? And they had said that there was one that was not of their clan, and that we should stay in the house. And I said, well, Joshua's not here. He's out walking. So, of course, I immediately went out. And my son was coming in the driveway, and I said, they don't want us out here. There's something out here that shouldn't be here. And we went in the house, and it must have been in the woods because they would throw rocks at whatever shouldn't be there. And we could see the rocks being thrown to run it out. They were very protective of the area. They did not live at my property. Most people, when they have them around them, they don't actually live there. That's where they go to communicate with us, with different habituators that they interact with. Most of the time, the actual place, they'll make temporary shelters there, but where they actually stay at is a completely different area. I was taken there by them one time. What I saw was beyond belief. There was the one nest that they did show me could have held an entire family. It was built with brush on the bottom, about 4 to 4.5 feet off the ground. I'm 5'9.5", and I would have a difficult time climbing into it without breaking any of the branches down.
Got work experience? At UVU, it's more than that. It's the key to fast-tracking your degree. With credit for prior learning, you're
finish off this Bigfoot sighting thing.
Fields like digital media, emergency services, or technology management can count toward your degree. By the way, you can start counting today. Your next stop to success. Visit Navigate Faster for the degree to your future and get credit for what you do.
It was probably a good 12 to 14 feet wide, at least from the ground to the top. I would say at least 18 to 20 feet in height. And there were branches all woven around it. It looked like one solid piece with an opening at the end where they could just climb in. It was 100% waterproof. When I was taken there, it was raining out, and there was not one drop of water in there. And the location, I don't know many people that could get to the location. And there was 3 Bigfoot there. There was a male, a female, and a small child that was a girl. The male had a blackish brown color hair, almost like a dark brown, very shaggy, had some naps on it. The female was also of a brownish color, although not as dark as the male. And her hair was more wild on top, but not overly long, and her hair length was about the same as hers. The child was blonde, and she had very, very long hair. She was absolutely adorable. She was probably, I want to say, 4 foot tall when I saw her. But they don't live right on your property. They might have a teepee set up, or, we had large pine trees, and they had taken the branches and pulled them down so it looked like a tent. I'd taken pictures of it, actually. And they would go in there, and there was a wire fence. It used to be a hot wire, and it wasn't an active live fence when I had it. That went between my property and the next door neighbors, and they had taken that wire and pulled it up over one of the branches, so it was a perfect in and out for them, and they would go in and out. And my daughter, on the other side of that fence, it used to be hay fields, and it was just overgrown tall grass. My daughter and I went for a walk back there, and we had camera. I was just taking pictures of structures, and she kept saying, "Mom, did you see that? Did you see that?" And I said, "What?" And she said, "There's heads that keep popping up out of this tall grass." And so I took just random pictures of all this tall grass, and when I got home, it was loaded with heads, and some standing up in the background where they would jump up and down. They do what's called a belly crawl, and the only thing I can say that it would be likened to is when we watched Scooby-Doo as kids, and he would get on his toes and go across the ground, and you'd hear it ding, 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 where it was like on the belly. They'll do the same thing. I actually had a friend come over to the house, and I wasn't home at the time, and they called me on my cell phone, and I said, "I'll be there in like 15 minutes. Go on into the house. The house is unlocked." And he said, "Oh no, I'll wait." And I said, "Okay." And Shadow went across, which was the white male that I was very close with. He went on a belly crawl right across the yard and behind this guy's truck. Scared the daylights out of him. He left so fast. He said, "I'll never go there again without you." And I said, "Well, did he hurt you?" And he said, "No. He was just on his belly." He said it looked like he was a belly move that went across. He was on his fingers and his toes. But they go very fast. Very, very fast. I've seen them walking on the 2 legs. I've seen them go down on all fours. They're primarily on sheep. Protective, very protective. I limited how many people would go to my house. A lot of my friends had already seen them at my house, but I was concerned for their safety. So we were very careful. We didn't. And it was in the middle of the winter. It was very cold out, and it was about 11:30 at night, and our furnace went out. And I had to call a repairman in the middle of the night. I had small children. I couldn't let kids get cold or a pipe freeze. And the kids were in panic, and they're like, "Mom, what are we going to do? What are the Bigfoots going to do if these people come out? They don't know who they are." And I said, "Well, we'll deal with it. We've got to get the heat going." So when the gentleman came in, as soon as he came in, we heard they started hollering. And I brought the man in the house, got him working on the furnace, and I said to the kids, I said, "You guys watch this gentleman. I'm going outside because they had started to pound on the house, and I didn't want this man frightened and leaving without fixing the furnace. So I'm out there in the cold, standing at the tree line, and I'm going, all I want you guys to do is just stay quiet. Don't be seen. I don't have hair. My children don't have hair. We're going to freeze. I'm not like you. I can't be. I mean, I was explaining it to them. They're highly intelligent. Highly, highly intelligent. And I said, I just want you to be good. And they were quiet. They were just as quiet as can be while the furnace got fixed. Gentleman got out to his truck and started to leave, and they just pelted rocks at the back of his truck all the way out. Fortunately, it was so dark out. We didn't have floodlights or anything out there, so when you were out in my yard, it was dark. We had the porch light, that was it. And so I don't even know if he realized all the rocks that came flying at him while he was driving out, but we at least got the furnace fixed. I did have people out. They would be nervous. They'd watch, and I would go up and I would hug that person and say, it's okay. Everything's fine. This is a friend. And then we never had problems. I was outside one time, and I was in the side yard, and I had the dogs out, and apparently another male had come in that wasn't from that clan that they were concerned about, and they told me to take the dog and go in the house. I said, okay, so I did. And we had, because there was woods in front and woods right behind the house, you could see all of these rocks come flying from one side of the woods to the other. It was really unbelievable. The kids were in the house, and they were watching out the window until it finally stopped. And then everything was settled down, and we could go back out again. But we had a garage, and it wasn't attached to the house. It was a two-car garage. And I had a lot of stuff stored in it. And I also had garbage bags that were my grandchildren's clothes that my daughter-in-law had brought over and just set in the garage, and they hadn't been there very long. But when we would get these storms that would come up out of nowhere, I was just in a storm belt. And so when it would get bad like that, because we did have some of the youngsters and the adolescents up by the house a lot, I mean, there was always somebody out there. Even if we couldn't see them, you could hear them out there. And so when the storms would come up, I'd leave the garage door open. And I also had outdoor cats, and that way the cats could get in the garage. If the Bigfoots needed shelter, they would go in there. And I never went out there and tried to see them. I never went out there and tried to snap pictures. I have had luck getting pictures, but I have tried to be very respectful. They go by a lot of Native American traditions, and in their culture, when you take a picture, the camera lens steals your soul. And that's the problem with it. They also, their body chemistry is different, and that causes a lot of the problem with the blurring. I have some that aren't blurred pictures, that aren't block squatches as people call them, but I try to be respectful on how many I take and when I take them. So if I knew they were going to go in the garage, I never was intrusive. I never went out there. I left them alone. I didn't want them to feel cornered. I didn't want them to feel stressed. They were very good about trying to not scare me, and I reciprocated that. I didn't want that kind of a relationship. I know a lot of people will go out and do all these crazy things just because they want to see them. And I always tell them, you want positive interaction. You don't want the negative. If you want a relationship with them, it's mutual respect on both sides. And you can't expect them to react any differently than you would if someone were to come into your home unannounced. And when you go in the woods, you're now in their home. So we had all these things in the garage, and I never thought to check if things disappeared. And the kids would come in one day and they said, Mom, our basketball's gone, our football's gone, we can't find them. We looked all over, couldn't find him, and then I noticed that one of the bags of clothing was gone as well.
Your adventure doesn't stop. Neither should your coffee. Head to Maverick for a smooth, rich cup of one of our premium roasts. Thanks to our bean-to-cup machines, it's always fresh and delicious. Maverick, adventure's first stop. Your adventure doesn't stop. Neither should your coffee. Head to Maverick for a smooth, rich cup of one of our premium roasts. We travel the world to find the best beans in origins like Brazil and Colombia, then deliver it to you at a great price. Whether you're waking up to an adventure or keeping one going, when you pour a coffee from Maverick's Bean to Cup machines, you know it's always fresh and delicious. If you like a light roast, keep an eye out for our new breakfast blend, available at select locations. Maverick, adventure's first stop. Your adventure doesn't stop. Neither should your coffee. Head to Maverick for a smooth, rich cup of one of our premium roasts. Thanks to our Bean to Cup machines, it's always fresh and delicious. Maverick, adventure's first stop.
Now, I've not seen any of them wear clothes. I do know close friends that have seen one or two. I know that the Bigfoots will use animal hides, and they will wear them. I've seen it. I've seen them with ribbons in their hair. So I know that's always a possibility. But they took the bag of clothes, and it was all baby clothes. I mean, it wasn't anything that was going to fit anybody anyway. But we went to the back of the woods, and we found the bag of the clothing shredded. And there was only one or two things left. I don't know what they ever did with them, but they took them all. And then we found the football, and the football looked like somebody held it in their hand and squeezed it, just like if you were holding a tin can and crunched it. I mean, it was just completely depleted. And there was a muddy handprint on it. So it was very apparent what had happened. We didn't find the basketball for several months, and when we found it in the field in the place next door where nobody lived at. And it looked like somebody bit it, like they tried to bite an apple. There was just a chunk bitten out of it. It was hysterical. But we knew it was ours because it had the kids' names on it. And they got into the tool bench. We had a tool bench in there. And it was my ex-husband at the time. And he went out there one day and he said, "Where are all my tools? Like, all the tools are gone." And I said, "I don't know." And he said, "Well, did the kids get them?" We were married still at the time. He said, "Did the kids get my tools?" And I said, "No, nobody's leaving them out there." And I knew what had happened. It was the only logical explanation. There was nobody around us. And I knew the kids hadn't been in it. Those tools were gone for 2 years. And it was all wrenches, screwdrivers, things you could grab with your hand. It wasn't an electric tool of any kind. And like 2.5 years later, I went out on the porch one day, and they were all lined up, and I have pictures of it, lined up on the banister of my deck, rusted, completely rusted. Obviously, they were not anywhere where they were not in water, but completely rusted. So we did get them back. But, they never did anything that I think they thought was hurtful. There was pranks. They played pranks all the time. Dr. Igor stuff comes to my house every time he's in the States. I met him when I was living at that property. He came out to spend the afternoon. Somebody had told him about me, one of the only person that was in the Bigfoot world at the time that I talked to. And he asked if he could come out. He did. He was going to stay 2 hours. He stayed 10 days because of all the activity. And he's gotten to be a member of our family. He comes every time. And they would play pranks on him constantly. He would go out there. We had a truck, and he sat out in the truck. We put a jar with chicken legs in it and screwed the top on it. And he put it out at the feeding area. And he watched that all night long. And they never came in and got any of the food. He went in the house to get a cup of coffee about 5:30, walked back out, and the jar was on the hood of the truck. The lid was open and the chicken was gone. So, they waited till he left and did it. They would sit outside the bedroom window and make noises at him when he was working. They were pretty playful. Their big thing was me going out at 2 a.m. And it happened every night. It wasn't once in a while. The only time I ever know of that they did not do that was there was a death. And then they did 4 days of silence. And so they weren't there for 4 days. But I would go out. In fact, the one night I hadn't been feeling well. I was so tired. I'm just not doing it. And my kids, I was so tired. I took cold medicine and I was sound asleep. And my kids came and woke me up and said, "Mom, will you please go out there with them? They are pounding on the house. We have school the next day, and we're not going to get any sleep." I was like, "Okay, fine. Throw your mom out in the woods and get out." So I ended up going out so they would let the kids sleep. But Christmas time, I put lights out there. They loved the lights out there. I put a boombox out there and played Christmas music. And it had batteries in it. And they'd take the boombox, and I'd get the boombox out of the woods the next day. We just had such a good time. I never was fearful with that particular group. I could tell when strange ones were in and around, and then I would be more cautious. I had my granddaughter, who was 4.5 years old, and my grandson, who was 5 months, come and stay with me for about 3 months. Their mom was in the military, and so they came and stayed with me. And my granddaughter was out front. My whole property then was sand. And she was out playing in the sand and making sand castles and playing. And she was only about 6 foot from the wood. And I was watching her through the window. I was making her lunch. And at that time, part of the day, they usually weren't even up at the house yet. And they would come in early morning and then they'd leave and they'd come back about 3 in the afternoon. So I wasn't too concerned. And Blackie, Brownie, and Shadow had come up in the woods. And I looked out there and I saw pebbles roll from the woods to her. And then she would pick them up and she'd toss them back into the woods. And then they'd roll them back. And it was a game that they would play back and forth. And when I realized they were out there, because I don't care how friendly anything is, these are your children, your grandchildren, you trust nobody. So I ran out there and I said to her, I said, honey, I want you to come in the house with Grandma. And she said, okay. And we had just taken her to see the movie Alvin and the Chipmunks. And she was so excited. She was going, Grandma, Grandma. And I said, what's the matter? And she said, you have Alvin and the Chipmunks living in your woods, but yours are really, really big. You're bigger than Dad and Grandpa. But you got Alvin and the Chipmunks. And I thought, you know what, that's a good thing to tell a 4.5-year-old kid that it is. It was safety. So she thought they were chipmunks for a long time until she found out that they were Bigfoot. She has an ongoing relationship with them today. We moved in South Carolina in 2018. I had 11 grandchildren. I was able to see all my grandchildren at the 3 here in South Carolina. They would come to Michigan to visit, but they never had grandparents that lived by them because their grandparents on the other side had passed. And so I wanted them to have that experience that grandparents were around. They could go to Grandma's house on the weekend. And I got divorced and remarried, and so my current husband and I moved here. And I thought, you know, it was so much to give up. I was so worried and concerned about the ongoing activity. I didn't have to wait long. There's 3 clans around me now, and the activity continues. And she has ongoing contact with them. When she's here, they'll go in the tree line, you know, where she can see them, or she'll get a wave, or she's never had any fear. My kids have had a healthy respect, but not a fear. They didn't like not having curtains, so I put up blinds for them in the kitchen and the living room and the dining room and curtains in their room. Because we had the house in Michigan, the window for the kitchen was like 7 8 feet off the ground. And they were big enough that they could look in it. And so she would be in the kitchen at night, she'd look in the kitchen window and one would watch her. So, you know, they've all been experienced with that. My older children, when they got old enough to move, they would come to visit, and they would end up seeing them. We had a bonfire one night, and we had a concrete slab. This was while we were still in Michigan. There was a concrete slab, and it had a broken down old building on it when we moved in, and we tore it down. I was concerned the kids would play in it and they would get hurt. So we tore it down, and we had this slab of concrete. And it had cemented to the concrete slab were cinder blocks all around the outside, and we tried everything. We could not get those cinder blocks off of there. And we tried. And I jokingly said one day, you know, if you wanted to help since you're here all the time, you could get these blocks off. They can't get them off. And like the following week we went out there, and they had been ripped off the cement. They were all there, but they had been ripped, like the cinder blocks that had been cemented to the concrete slab were removed. And they had them in a circle. It was really bizarre. And they had pieces of wood and stuff in the middle of it. And so we used to put logs up there and we'd have a bonfire on it because it was easy to clean up. And I had my son from Virginia, and he was in the Navy at the time. And him and his family had come to visit. We had this large bonfire. We had marshmallows and sodas and hot dogs and music. They were all, you know, sitting on the back of the truck. The pickup truck backed up to the bonfire. And we just had a really great time. And after it was over and the kids were back in the house and everything was pulled out, my son had cleaned up the concrete. You know, there was no wood left. There was nothing, simply no wood left. He burned it all down. He swept up the ashes and took care of that. So there was nothing more than a cement slab.
Your adventure doesn't stop. Neither should your coffee. Head to Maverick for a smooth, rich cup of one of our premium roasts. Thanks to our bean-to-cup machines, it's always fresh and delicious. Maverick, adventure's first stop. Your adventure doesn't stop. Neither should your coffee. Head to Maverick for a smooth, rich cup of one of our premium roasts. We travel the world to find the best beans in origins like Brazil and Colombia, then deliver it to you at a great price. Whether you're waking up to an adventure or keeping one going, when you pour a coffee from Maverick's bean-to-cup machines, you know it's always fresh and delicious. If you like a light roast, keep an eye out for our new breakfast blend, available at select locations. Maverick, adventure's first stop. Your adventure doesn't stop. Neither should your coffee. Head to Maverick for a smooth, rich cup of one of our premium roasts. Thanks to our bean-to-cup machines, it's always fresh and delicious. Maverick, adventure's first stop.
And we had left a few sodas out there, and I think the kids had left a bag of marshmallows. And we were all in the house, and my son walked out to his truck and came back in, and he said, Mom, did you want another bonfire going? And I said, what are you talking about? He said, there is a fire going on the concrete slab. Now, we didn't even have any wood left on it. There was nothing on that slab to make it hot. This was like 2 hours later. And I said, you've got to be kidding me. He said, no, there's 3 or 4 pieces of wood out there, and there's a fire. And we went out there, and there was footprints all around the concrete slab. And there was muddy footprints on the slab, and they were 18.5-inch tracks. So it definitely wasn't any of us that started it. And the bag of marshmallows was gone, and the soda cans were crushed, completely crushed. So, you know, we knew then that the age-old thing that they don't make fire was not accurate. I've actually at times seen them out in the woods, and they've actually I've seen them. They've had, you know, small amounts of it. I know in the wintertime, I've witnessed where they've done that. But we moved here to South Carolina, and the activity started right away. The first day we were here, we moved in the night before, and we had the DirecTV man who was supposed to come out the following day and hook up the cable TV. And he didn't get here till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And he was out there working in the yard, and he said, well, I forgot some of the wires that I needed. And I said, wires? Why wouldn't you bring everything? He said, I didn't realize it wasn't in the truck. I'll go get them and I'll be back. I said, okay. He didn't come back for like 2 hours. It was after 7 o'clock when he got here, and we moved in March, so it was, you know, not in the summer months, and so it was dark by then. And he came in and he said, I'm going to work on it, but there's not enough light. So I turned the lights on to the car, and I faced it where he was working so he had light. And where he was putting the pole in was only about 5-6 feet away from the tree line. I have trees that, not only am I in the woods, I have trees that go up and down the sides of the property. And he was out there for about 30 minutes, and he came in the house like he was on fire. And he was terrified, absolutely petrified. And I knew they were out there. I'd seen eyes shine. And he said, ma'am, you have something in your trees. And I thought it's probably a raccoon or it's probably a possum. I was worried about it. He said, no. He said, this is big. He said, it's bigger than me. And he was roughly 6 foot tall. And he said, it's a lot bigger than me, and it's shaking the trees and the bushes out there. And I said, you're really scared, aren't you? And he said, I'm not going back out. And I said, well, I don't want you to do anything that you're not comfortable doing. And he said, I'll come back in the morning early, but I can't work here. I can't. I said, okay. And he says, I don't even want to go out to my car. I said, I'll walk you out to your car. So I walked him out to the car, and he left. And the next morning, another guy came, and I said, where's such and such? And he said, he won't come back. He was so terrified. I said, well, did anything happen to him? He just said the trees were getting shut. And he said, yeah. He said, nothing touched him. He said, it was just the trees were getting shut. And he was absolutely terrified. He said, he won't come out here now. Well, that morning, I said to them that night, I went outside, and I said, listen, we're going to coexist. You can't run off the TV guy. Like, you can't run off people that come here. So when we got up in the morning, The whole reason the guy didn't have it done during the daylight was he didn't have any wires. And we got up in the morning, and I don't know where they got them. It certainly wasn't any type of cable. There was a wad of wires that had been shoved up against my front door. My husband went to go to work. He opened that door, and here is this huge ball of wires, all multicolored wires. I don't know where they got them. I just know they did. And he went out there, and they told him that they were sorry. They didn't mean to scare anybody. And then it was like 2 hours later, the cable guy actually came out and fixed it. My husband's had experiences since he's been with me. He had experiences before I met him. I actually met him because he was someone that wanted to talk to me about his experiences to kind of figure out what was happening. And then when we got together, it was just a perfect union because it blended well with the Bigfoots. I always say the Bigfoots picked him out for me because they absolutely adore him. He sees them every bit as much as I do, and they'll speak with them just like they will me. We don't go out there, sit down in the woods, and have sit-down conversations. I want to be clear on that. If we're out there, it's a word here, a broken sentence there, or I'll go out there and I'll leave pounding on the house for something. I'll go, what do you guys need? One night, a couple years ago, it was they needed ginger. They wanted ginger root, and they couldn't find any, and they needed it. They had somebody that was sick. So I said, all right, I went into town and I got ginger root and put it out for them, and they took it. But they've also asked me to do that before, and there was no ginger root. I had to get it in a glass jar, and I left it for them. They wouldn't touch it, and when I asked them why, they wanted me to pour it out. They didn't want to touch the glass. And I said, if I pour it out, it was raining at the time, I said, you're not going to get any, because what will happen is it will dissolve into the ground. So they never did take it that time, but they have taken the root when I left the root out for them. But we've had a very good, I think, good relationship. Any of the aggressive ones that I've encountered or dealt with, it's been because people have asked me there to help them with the situation. I've not had anything aggressive here. We've been very blessed. They've not bothered my animals. I started back when I was living in Michigan with them with my animals, and I would go outside and I would love on the animals, and I'd say, these are my babies, they're like my children. Just like you have pets, you have children. I don't hurt your pets, I don't hurt your children, you don't hurt mine. And I've honestly never had an issue. I have miniature pigs, I have an animal rescue, and I've always had just an absorbent amount of animals. I've never bothered one of them. I know a lot of people have said they've hurt their dogs or whatever, but I don't know if it's because of the relationship I have with them, if it's because of the way I explain it to them, but I've not had an issue. They've been just fine. They do have pets. They'll use coyotes, fox. I had one out here has a black wolf. I've seen one run with a cougar. But I've never had any experiences where anything that they had has ever bothered any of mine. When I was in Michigan and Igor Burstev tried to get this recording, it didn't happen, but they would go at a certain time out to the feeding area and they'd get their food. They got to where, and I watched this time after time, there were 3 raccoons, and the Bigfoots came in from a certain direction every night, which is where they actually lived at. It was back that way. And the raccoons would come that same direction. There were 3 of them, and they would come in every night. They'd climb up the trees, they'd check the buckets, they'd look at the food. They never took one bite out of it, never touched it, but they would check it. And then the bigger raccoon would go to the top of the trees, it'd look in the direction that the Bigfoots came in, and it would scream. It was, I swear, I know it sounds crazy, it was like he was the lookout. And then they would come down and they would leave a different direction. And it was a matter of minutes, and the Bigfoots would come in for the food. And when Igor was there, I told him about it. So he decided he was going to film it. And he set up a tripod facing the feeding area where the raccoons would come in. That particular night, he was there, and 2 other researchers were there that were very good friends of mine. And they were going to stay up all night long, and they were going to record this. And I said, I'm tired. I've been out in the woods with them all day long. I said, I'm going to bed. I watch this every night. So I went to bed. Apparently what had happened was the other 2 researchers were up against my house, and it was a shaded area there, so the Bigfoots didn't see them. But they saw Igor messing with the tripod because the raccoons had come in. He was filming the raccoons, and he was hunched down behind the tripod. A Bigfoot came up behind Igor. He had no idea it was there. And my friends are up against the house, and they're trying to figure out how to let Igor know this Bigfoot is standing not even 6 to 10 feet behind him, and everything Igor would do, the Bigfoot would imitate. And he did that for just a few minutes, and then he turned and walked away. And Igor saw the shadow of him as he was walking away, but he never knew that this thing was so close he could have touched him. So like I said, we moved here. I let my neighbor, who was a very, very dear woman, I warned her. I said, listen, I'm here. I know they'll be here at some point in time. It always happens. I want you to be aware because I don't want you frightened. And she said, well, what should I do? And I said, the worst thing you can do is pull a gun on them, because if there's one, the chances are there's more. And you don't want that relationship. If you're in danger, if they're trying to physically hurt you, that's one thing. But if they're just existing, if they're just looking at you, if they're just walking through your yard, you don't want to pull a gun because you don't want that relationship. She said, all right, I'll let you know if we see him. And I was out just in the woods just a little bit behind my house, and I found a pot. And it looked like at one time it had a plant in it. It was a beautiful pot, and I knew it wasn't mine. So I went next door and I said to her, I said, is this yours? And she said, oh my gosh, that's been gone for 6 months. Where'd it come from? I said, over here in the woods. And I said, they'll take pots and stuff you have out. I knew that they had done it. She said, well, she just laughed. She said, well, I'm glad I got it back. She said, no problem. And about a month later, her grandson came over and said, Miss Robin, Grandma needs to talk to you. I said, okay. I said, are you all right? And he said, I saw one of your Bigfoots. And I said, you did? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, they're not mine, but I'm glad you saw it. I said, are you okay? What did it look like? And he said, it looked like a big giant gorilla, and it walked from Grandma's yard across your backyard and into the woods. And he said, it looked at me, and then it just kept walking.
If you're a facilities manager at a university, you know students rely on the cafeteria for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and the occasional weekend snack. So when the dishwasher breaks down and dirty plates pile up, the mess hall can turn messy in the blink of an eye. Enter Granger. With over 1 million industrial-grade products and fast delivery, the product you need now is never far away. So you can turn that dishwasher back into a lean, clean washing machine. Call Granger.com or just stop by. For the ones who get it done.
I said, okay. So I went over to Grandma's house, and she said the night before, or the day before her grandson saw it, her son, who was in his 30s, was outside working in the yard and walked up to the tree line, and he heard a growl, and he looked up, and this thing was towered above him, and he's probably 6'4". He said it was massive, and it looked right at him, and he thought it made like a growl noise. But when they say hi, it's such a deep guttural sound, it can be misconstrued as a growl. And I said, did it try to hurt you? And he said, never. It didn't do anything. And I said, well, when it took off, was it on 2 legs? Did it go on 4 legs? And he said, it moved so fast I never saw it. He said it was standing there. He said it looked me in the eye. I turned around, I went to go into the house, and he said, he told his mom, he said, where's the gun, where's the gun? And she said, what do you need a gun for? And he said, there's this huge thing out there. It looks like a big giant gorilla, but it's huge, it's massive, it's much bigger than I am. And she said, no, that's one of the Bigfoots, you don't get a gun. Did it try to hurt you? And he said, no. It made a noise, but that was it. And she said, Robin said, no matter what, unless it's trying to physically hurt you, you don't get a gun. She said, you don't do that. He says, all right. So they didn't do anything, and it left. So they were having, the following night, they were having a wedding reception over there, and we had been invited, and we were over there, and you could see him running in the tree line around the wedding reception. So my husband and I, Pat, we were out there, and we kept going to the tree line and talking to them, going, we need to stay back. People are going to be afraid, you know, and we kept, all night long. We were kind of like on Bigfoot guard duty all night long. But they have a very good relationship with them over there. They don't hurt them. They don't, and my neighbor doesn't try to hurt the Bigfoot. They did steal a bag of dog food, but that was the worst offense they've created. They just are not, we haven't had a problem. Right across from my house is a 200-acre tree farm. So it's all nothing but pine trees there. And we'll go out on the porch, and it just lights up with eye shine, or you can see them walking between the trees. And we have a female, a male, and a child that will come up in the front yard at night. And the child is just, he's a sweetheart. He's getting really big now, but You know, he's a doll. He climbs up in the trees that outline the front yard. He's broken down most of my branches because he's gotten so big. I have a picture of him in my oak tree. He's got his hand over his face, and nobody will see his face, but you can see his nose, a little bit of his eyes, and his hand. And he was out there one night, and Mom wasn't with him. The dad was there. Shandol was standing across the road watching him. And every time these three would come, there was these three other Bigfoots that would stand off the property, off to the side and watch. So I don't know if they were like protecting them, guarding them, I don't know. But Mom wasn't here yet, and a friend of mine and I were standing on the front porch, and the little boy was playing, named Zerky, and Mom came running from the back of the property, and all I saw was this massive blur of shaggy gray and black hair as she dove into the bushes. Once she was in the bushes, she was fine, but she was so aggravated. Igor was here, and earlier in that day, he had climbed into those bushes. They had cleared out the bushes and made like a hole in there where they would go and sit. And he went in there to sit down and take pictures and look for prints. And I told him, I said, you're going to make them really mad. They don't like it when you're in there because that's their spot, that's their area. You know, you need to get out. And he was very respectful. He got out. And I think she was upset about that. Once she was in there and saw that, the child was fine, then she settled right back down. But they come and go as they please. You know, we have times where we won't see them for a couple weeks, then maybe we'll see one walk through the woods. You know, 2 days ago, I hadn't seen him, I've heard them, and they've knocked on the house, but I hadn't seen them in a little bit. And the dogs were outside, and they just started going crazy and ran over the side of the fence and were barking in the woods. And I went out there, and there was a big black male that was over there, and he was out in the woods shaking the bushes. I could see the bushes shake, and I could see a figure of him as he walked. And then last night, the dog woke up we have several dogs, and one of them got up and wanted out, so I let him outside, and one was in the backyard. It jumped the fence and then ran over into the neighbors. But they stayed pretty close. I've been very fortunate. I went to Texas one time. A friend that's now passed away was setting up a research site and asked me to come and help. And I did. And in this research area, there is a section that backs up to national land that's protected. It's a wildlife refuge. And they have all these berry bushes. And he said, I always go back by the berry bushes. He said, most of the time the berries are all picked off them. And he wanted me to go back there, and I did. And we had his grandchildren. And this is the only time again, this wasn't one of my plans. This was an aggressive Bigfoot. But the kids got out of the car, and they were like 8, 6, 4, something of that nature. And we got out of the car, and there was a tree stand that had been abandoned there. And they ran up and they climbed on the tree stand. I think the youngest they must have been, 10, 8, and 6, because the youngest was able to climb the tree stand. I'm sorry. And they went up this tree stand, and I was having a fit because I thought they were too young to be up in this tree stand. And my friend was like, oh, they're fine. And we knew there were Bigfoot there. We had heard them. And I could see the bushes shaking, and they were coming in from all different sides. And we were like in this little alcove. And I looked down, and I see all these dead deer, these deer bones. And I looked at my friend, and I said, Dale, my God, they eat here. This is where they eat. You just took your grandchildren to where they eat. You put them at their dining room table. And I was not real comfortable with this clan to begin with. And so I tried to get the kids to come down without scaring them. And the male had already hit the end of the clearing, and he was standing at the end of the clearing. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't want him to get to the kids. So I walked past where the children were, and I was telling them to come down, that they needed to come down. We would go get ice cream and do something fun or whatever, but I wanted them out of that tree stand and back in the truck. So I went between the kids and the Bigfoot. And I was still a good 30, 40 feet from him. And he said we could leave, but he wanted the kids to stay. And I said, that's not going to happen. And he said, leave the children. And I kept saying no. And I stood my... which was probably stupid, but I wasn't going to leave these innocent kids there. And he bluff charged. because he told me, he said he would, he would kill me if I didn't leave the children. I would die. And I said, well, I'm still not leaving the kids. I can be here. I know I can be here, and I'm not leaving. He bluff charged. He got close. I was standing next to a palmetto bush. He leveled the palmetto bush, and the kids had just started to come out of the tree stand. I mean, just started to. Scared the crap out of them. They went back up the tree stand. He plowed right next to me, so close it blew my hair back, and it leveled the palmetto bush. And then he disappeared into the trees and in the bushes, and the kids never saw him. I did, the kids did. And I said, oh, they're just playing games. They want to play, and I'm trying to be super calm and chill because I didn't want the kids to feed into the fear. And I'm like, no, we're still going to go get ice cream. We'll play with them later. So they came down, and my friend now is absolutely white as a ghost. Doesn't know what to do. And he's like, hurry, get back to the truck, get back to the truck. And I said, call the kids. So he called the kids, and he said, come on. And I said, I'm not budging until those kids are in the truck. I said, start the truck, open the doors. So he opened the doors, started the truck. Kids got in the truck, and I backed. I wouldn't turn my back on it. I backed all the way up to the truck and got in. We got in the truck, and I said, just hit the gas and get us out of here. Because it was like on a 100-acre parcel of land. And we took off, and this foot came right up behind the truck and just lapped the back of the truck. And we left. And I think he went back a couple more times before he died, but he didn't go to that area of that property. He went to another area that was a little bit safer, and the grandkids never went back. But I've been very blessed. The ones that are around me, I've got, like I said, I think there's 3 or 4 clans over here now that are individualized, but they all get along well. The rule is everybody can be here as long, I don't care what you are, who you are, you're welcome here as long as you come in peace and love in your heart. And that's just kind of what the rules are here. And I've been fortunate. My husband and I are both very blessed. We have ongoing contact. I have more stories than I could even begin to tell, but that's just a little bit of what goes on. So I hope everybody enjoyed it, and I hope you all have your own amazing experiences with them. They really are an amazing people. Their culture is not like ours. Their ways are not like ours. Our actions don't mean the same as theirs. And I think, there's so many things that we can learn from each other, and there's so many things that people don't know about them that are just incredible, but all true. And you can live copacetically near them, and you can have them around you and not have aggression and fear. Not always. There are some out there that are bad, and they're just bad, and you can't change that. But for the good ones. But you have to learn their ways. You have to understand when they do something what it means, because it may mean something to us, but it's really not what their intent is. So the way to learn to live around the good ones is just to learn what it means in their world. And so the last couple of weeks, well, I didn't last year due to COVID-19, but the year before that, a friend of mine was doing conferences, and I have done conferences. I did the International Scientific Conference in Siberia for Dr. Igor Borstev, and he had it. I went to Siberia and spoke about them. And I did some ones in Upper Part of Michigan. Other than that, I didn't do any of the conferences I was invited to. I preferred to stay off by myself with them and just learn from them, and that's what I've been doing up until 2 years ago. And a friend of mine was doing conferences and wanted me to be in them. And when I talked to Bigfoot, they wanted people to know about them. They wanted people to know the truth, and they wanted people to learn about them so it could be more peaceful. And so I did a year's worth of conferences, and then COVID hit. And then this year I'm going to be speaking in Nebraska and possibly in Michigan. But other than that, I just hang out with my groups. So I hope you guys all enjoyed everything. And I hope you have wonderful experiences of your own. Just try to remember, you want positive encounters, not the negative. The negatives can go bad so quick. And if you have a negative encounter, it just ruins any chance that you're going to have for anything positive to come out of it.
Well, that's it for tonight's show. If you've had a Bigfoot sighting and would like to be a guest, please go to mybigfootsighting.com and let us know. Thanks for listening. Have a great night.
See you later. Alright. This is where I'm gonna shut it off. Bye-bye.